Railroads and locomotive manufacturers love experimenting with motive power. They're always looking for ways to make things cheaper and more efficient. While we typically think of railroad experimentation as a thing of the past, I think many people would be surprised to find that it's actually still alive and well, continuing to spawn eldritch contraptions that would certainly rival the machines of yesteryear in terms of strangeness and complexity. A prime example of this would be BNSF's GG20B Green Goats and Norfolk Southern's RP14's, the wildest looking locomotives that come out of the 21st century. But why did these engines look so strange? Why have so few been created? And why did railroads end up hating them? These wacky engines are actually cabless gensets, but what the heck is that? A genset, or generator set, is a type of locomotive that has anywhere from 2 to 4 small prime movers instead of one big one. Each engine drives its own alt-gen and is automatically turned on or off according to how much power the locomotive needs. For light switching, only 1 or 2 engines might be running, but when pulling a large cut of cars, 3 to 4 engines will be running, providing the maximum electrical output. Gensets are meant to be hyper-efficient, affordable, and easy to maintain, because each generator set sits on a pallet inside the locomotive, and should a failure occur, the whole power pack can be swapped out with ease. This is exactly how NS 2120 and 2120 work, but for the BNSF Green Goats, it's a bit different, because they're actually hybrids, not true gensets. Inside, there's only one power pack that's used to charge a massive bank of lithium-ion batteries, and those are what's ultimately powering the locomotive. Gensets are almost always made from taking older EMD Jeeps, stripping them down to a bare frame, and rebuilding them from the ground up. But really, any locomotive can be made into a genset. Union Pacific has some pretty interesting RP20BDs and RP20CDs, which used to be SD40-2s and -7s. So, now we know how these things work. But why do these lobotomized locomotives not have a cab? Well, it's cheaper. Since railroads were buying and building these engines just to test them out, I can't imagine they wanted to dump too much money into them right away. So eliminating the cab was just a way to avoid wasting money, should the project fall through. Their lack of a cab limited their capability though, because they could only be controlled through an RC pack or MU signals coming from another locomotive. As for Norfolk Southern's 2 RP14's, these were made from kits at the famous Juniata locomotive shops. These dual-engine gensets were meant to serve as normal switcher locomotives, but they were later assigned to shop duty. I think the only reason Norfolk Southern had these locomotives made was simply to save fuel and reduce emissions. They still need an operator, and someone will still have to throw drawbars, so they ain't saving money or increasing safety by cutting back on manpower. As for BNSF, they bought these environmentally friendly switcher engines in the 2000s with money from a federal clean air grant. The Green Goats were sent down to Texas to work as yard power, mainly hanging around the Alliance Intermodal facility. BNSF purchased these largely for the same reasons Norfolk Southern did: fuel savings and reduced emissions, as well as wanting to get into the RC switching game, which was really taking off at the time. While gensets sound extremely good on paper, they just don't hold up in the real world. When they made their debut in the 2000s, railroads wanted them right then and there, so there wasn't much time to work out early design flaws, which led to a high rate of failure. Their main issue was their prime movers. Not only were they slow to load, but small V8 and inline-6 engines ain't designed to run at or near max capacity for hours on end like a locomotive engine is. And because of this, gensets had a tendency to either catch fire or grenade power packs. After all, switching is very hard on a locomotive. There are thousands of repetitive impacts and intense vibrations that these smaller automotive engines simply ain't designed to withstand. On top of that, the non-standard parts that made up the generator sets and inherent complexity of the locomotives made sourcing and replacing components a huge pain for railroads. Unfortunately, like most Class 1 gensets, the Green Goats and RP14's had an extremely short service life. Both locomotive models were made in the late 2000s, and both were already laid up by the mid-2010s. Norfolk Southern still has one RP14 in storage, but BNSF completely rid themselves of their cabless green goats before the first half of the 2010s was up. Of course, we couldn't talk about the green goats without mentioning BNSF 1205. This green goat was supposed to go to Canadian Pacific, but it was never delivered, so BNSF bought it and converted it into the first 100% hydrogen burning locomotive in the country. Unfortunately, this engine was also a failure and was laid up shortly after it entered service. Today, it rests in preservation at the Oklahoma Railway Museum. Gensets weren't as big a failure as they may seem, because they're still regularly used on short lines and terminal railroads, where the workload is usually pretty light. Also, these locomotives have improved quite a bit in the near 15 years they've been around. While it's true they ain't as preferable as traditional engines, and they certainly were a flop on Class 1s, they still get the job done and are dang good at saving money in the process. Thanks for watching. If y'all enjoyed this video, consider checking out some other ones of mine. Also, maybe pass yourself by the merch shop. Anyways, till next time.